What's going on, everybody? It's Nick Kosko here with On3 Sports. I have a special guest here today, Rock Harrison of ESPN and ACC Network, covering college wrestling, of course, at the highest level. Rock, appreciate the time as always, my man. Good to talk to you. Got to start first off. Wrestling season is basically in full swing. We are now halfway through the year, roughly, I would say, getting into conference duels now. I know you were just on the call with NC State and Oklahoma State, putting that match on the air as well. But that's where I want to go first, is the dual meet. And I've been talking to a lot of people, a lot of coaches over the past almost year now. Dual meets are so important. We want to rise dual meets as a sport, but there is no dual meet championship. So I'm going to give you that loaded question right off the bat. Does wrestling need a dual meet championship within the confines of the season?
Well, first of all, Nick, thank you for inviting me onto the show. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about wrestling. That's what I do, and I enjoy talking about it. And I was listening to your conversation with Earl about that. And the question is, do we need it? Do we need it? I don't know. Do we want it? Yes, we absolutely want it to happen. The need is going to be driven by the wrestlers as well as the fan base. And I think it's going to be challenging for us to change the dynamics of saying we've been individual so long, now we're just going to stop. It's going to be very hard to win that. What I will tell you from a media standpoint, dual meets are so much easier to follow. It's a concise time, concise period. You know what's going on. We can elaborate on strategies that are going on in the match. It is so much better to follow. And then you can follow the tournament. This team wins. They go to the quarters, to the semis, so forth and so on. So I say, do we need it? If we are trying to enhance the sport, and everybody wants to talk about growing the sport, that's the catchphrase, let's grow the sport, then yes, it makes perfect sense, because everyone else does it, and it's easier to follow, and it's good television. Now, the traditionalists, like many of us are, well, how are you going to determine the individual champ? Who's going to be the real champ? I don't have an answer for that, but I do know if you say that this person has won this amount of dual meets and they should be top seed, maybe you pull them out and have a smaller tournament from there. What I don't like is the team say, let's look at Noto from Lock Haven. Lock Haven may not make it into the national championships. There's a duel, but Noto is very good. Right. So should we say he doesn't get a shot to win a national championship? Absolutely not. And that's the great thing about wrestling. Wrestling is a sport where the team may be horrible, but you got one star. Right. And that star can bring in other people who want to follow their lead. So I do believe that it is something that will be helpful. How to include that and not take away the individual aspect is something that I have not been able to put my head around.
Right. I think that's the biggest concern with adding a team championship, or at least some sort of tournament where you have 16 to 24 teams and it's a dual meet championship. I know a lot of the suggestions are, well, you put it maybe in February, and that's where you cut off the dual season, and then you prepare for the individual tournament. So you don't take away from the individual tournament, but I think the discrepancy is, how do you crown your team national champion? And we know it goes to the individual tournament. We've seen Penn State dominate over the last decade plus, and you score at the national tournament. I think the best way to do it, at least in my mind, and again, my head is, it's way above my pay grade, I should say, in terms of the logistics of how you would do this. But you look at, well, you take away the team scoring from the individual tournament, and you leave the team national championship to the dual meets on the mat. That's what you should do at that point. But you keep the individual aspect of that. Does something like that appeal to you as a media member and also a fan of wrestling, where you say, all right, maybe mid-February is where we say, over the course of not even a week, we do all these dual meets, 16 to 24 teams, top 8 teams or so get a bye, and then all of a sudden you have your team national champion, and then you focus it on, okay, the individuals are gearing up for the conference tournaments and NCAAs.
Well, I'll take it a step further. It should be a one-semester sport. The 2-semester sport is hard. You want them to get ready in November after they've been practicing in September, and then you get a month off in December. And, they want to protect kids to get through to the second semester. I do believe that it should be a 1-semester sport. And from a media standpoint, let's get away from March Madness. That is a killer. And when Penn State had a good run with their basketball team, did eyes leave NCAA wrestling to watch? Perhaps. But I think if we can push it towards January start and perhaps an April type of ending, that would make sense, because April is not a really strong time for television when it talks about Olympic sports. So yes, the concept I've also heard that too, Nick, regarding making it individual sports. I've been following wrestling my whole life for the most part. I still can't score a tournament. I don't know.
No,
Half point here, you drop down to the consolation. This, I don't know. I know who wins. So yes, if we just take that out, who wins? Yep, semifinals, they win. That makes sense to me because only for the real hardcore people, they know what a half point means, and the tournament's already locked up. I don't know. If you just tell me who wins the next match and goes to the next match and they're the champ, thank you. Makes my life easier. On to the next. I feel
like that's the way to simplify it for maybe the casual fan. I know it is a larger conversation where you say, okay, do you appeal to the hardcore fan, make it better for them, it's a better viewing experience, or do you try to get the casual fan in here, make them learn the sport? I think you could do a little bit of both. And I think that's where the team concept comes in, because wrestling is such an individual sport, but they put such a heavy emphasis on the team aspect of it all year long. Then all of a sudden, for 2 weeks in March, you're worried about the individuals. And of course, we have those in-season tournaments as well for the individuals. But I feel like if you're going to go that big with the team aspect, especially with some of the bigger schools in the Big Ten, ACC, Big 12, wherever the case may be, where dual meets are a big deal. You have 5,000 plus people at these dual meets in these arenas just for 10 matches for team against team. It is individual sport, but if you're going to put that much team emphasis on it, then I feel like you have to figure out a way to insert a team championship. Now, maybe the first solution is maybe you don't do NCAA champion as a team. Maybe it's the Coaches Association, but you just award the dual meet and you fight for something, or maybe there's some kind of incentive for your wrestling program to be one of those top 24 teams and be represented as a team national champion, and you just leave the individual tournament pretty much as is.
I think the NWCA is known in the wrestling world, but the cachet of having an NCAA behind and saying we're the NCAA champion, that means something to fundraising, and you talk about Ivy League, how they left the EIWA. Was it necessary? Perhaps, but let's think about this from a fundraiser standpoint. If they say, well, Cornell has won the EIWA championship, they're like, what is that? So the name behind the championship does make a difference. So I think the NCAA has to be a part of it. One thing I've tried to, figure out why certain sports are doing well, Olympic sports, is I try to watch gymnastics. I understand gymnastics to an extent, but they're doing something right because it's an individual sport with a team aspect, and it's just like wrestling.
Right.
But somehow they've made it strong, and that's the only sport that I can really say that it is truly individual, but the team element, and they have very good numbers when it comes to ratings. And I'm trying to figure out what's different. What are they doing? But I think there is a happy medium, Nick. I don't know what that is, but I do think from a standpoint of watching, the dual meet makes sense. But I'm a traditionalist. I do want to know who's the best at each weight class. Right. Otherwise, why have weight classes?
Right. And I am by no means advocating for the elimination of the individual tournament, of course, because everyone knows those 3 days in March are ridiculous, whether it's in Tulsa, Detroit, Philadelphia, Oklahoma City. I can go on and on and on. And those 3 days, upsets all over the place. You find out who is the best throughout the entire country at an individual weight. And again, it's not always a top guy. It can always just be who has the best tournament, who has the most fight in them for about 5 straight matches. So
and I'll tell you that too. Let me head on it. Sure. What's so interesting about the NCAAs is the pendulum of emotions in the crowd. If it's two teams, it's half one, it's only be half as loud. But if there's a big upset or somebody, pulls out, a great win, 3/4 of a whole stadium or an arena will go absolutely nuts. And that's nothing like that. I can't think of any other sport where the pendulum of excitement and emotions can swing from just this small slither that may have 300 tickets and now 18,000 people going nuts for you. That's crazy to me. And that's only at the NCAA. So from just the excitement standpoint, and everyone has a match or two that they know that the whole place was going crazy because of a win or a loss, that is just good television. But, that being said, I do think we need a national champion for a duel.
Right. And I think there has to be a way to get all the collective minds together in order to say we can capture that moment, that singular moment, as you were just describing, and put it into a team aspect as well. So you have it throughout the entire season and not just for those 3 days in March. So let's get into some actual wrestling. Of course, Rock Harrison with me here on On3 Sports from ESPN and the ACC Network covering college wrestling. So, Rock, I know you were on the call for NC State and Oklahoma State won by the Cowboys 22-13 the other night. Just a couple of your takeaways from that match. I know, at least myself, I'm a Big Ten heavy guy, but of course, everyone's got to know the rise of the ACC. It's not as big as football, of course, in terms of the conference affiliations, but the ACC has some high-quality wrestling. NC State's one of those programs that you should really keep an eye on, but Oklahoma State did get the better of them the other night.
No doubt. I thought Oklahoma State wrestled very well, extremely well. And it's not that NC State wrestled bad, but Oklahoma State just wrestled better. They were tight matches that they weren't supposed to win. They won, obviously starting at 125, but at 174 with Thompson and Faison, Thompson's a freshman and Faison is a 6-year super senior. Those are the little things. So there were a lot of tight matches that just went Oklahoma State's way. And I think they needed that win after last year's performance at Tulsa. They needed to show that, hey, that was just a one-off. We are getting better as a team. So I thought from top to bottom, they wrestled well. And, everyone knows that Oklahoma State controls the elbows. That's what they do.
Right.
But they did a good job of attacking and staying center. They didn't stay on the outsides and just use the out of bounds to be safe. I thought they wrestled very well. NC State, talking to Coach Popolizzo in the preseason, he said he was changing his training. And in doing so, he wanted to make sure that they were peaking at the right time. And he said, we may take some lumps along the way, but we want to make sure that we don't peak too early and peak at the right time. So this is a part of the this system, so to speak, that they're implementing. Of course, they want to win every match,
right?
But they're trying to make sure that they are peaking at the right time and not too early. And he was honest about it. He said, we haven't done as well at the NCAAs as I would like.
When we look at individual rankings, and of course, again, we're going back to the notion of wrestling being the individual sport, and this is where this comes in. So individual rankings run by a lot of Big Ten guys, of course. Big Ten's the dominant conference right now in college wrestling. The ACC has a lot of high-quality guys that I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily see too often because the Big Ten is so up here, and then it's ACC and Big 12 right here battling for that second place position. But you are an expert, of course, on the ACC as a whole. Who are some of these guys that have really stood out to you through the halfway point of the season? They could be teams as a whole, maybe some individuals that are coming on strong. Who's really stood out to you so far as we approach mid-January?
Well, obviously, the change for Trent Hiley from 184 to 197 has been a surprise. He hasn't lost his pop. Yeah. He's always going to be in your face, but he hasn't lost his pop. And one of the things that he said, and I wrote it down, he said, I want to get better at wrestling and not at cutting weight. And I wish more and more student athletes would go that route. It's so much better when you're concentrating on, technique, little things, as opposed to what's my diet like along the way. But as you look up and down the lineup, I think when we look at Pitt's a solid team. Obviously, Nino Bonacorsi being a national champion, but there's some surprises along the way. I think that we're going to find out, where they stand once the season starts. They have a tough match this weekend against Oklahoma State, but they're more of a team. They don't have any real stars as individuals. Like, this is a star, but they're a team. But they're a team that is consistent, and they take the personality of their coach. When I slide down to UNC, and UNC, they're very confident, and it's because of Coach Cole. He's very confident, and when he says stuff, it's good clips for television. But Lachlan McNeil, I think that he is legitimately a national title threat, and he learned some things about preparation last year and getting himself better. Of course, he's had some losses, but as a solid wrestler, I think that he really can compete with the national championship on an individual basis. And then, of course, at Virginia Tech has stars, and Makai is the star. However, Carter Starach is just different, man.
He is.
Yeah. I mean, the dude he's on a bonus rate machine. He scares me. Like, I watch him, like, man, he would hurt me right now, and I'm a grown man. So he's different. But Makai is still going to be Makai. And I think that he's going to figure out ways to get back in the competition of a national championship. Those are the names that really drop. And there's obviously some freshmen. I'm waiting to really say something about freshmen until the dual meet season really starts. And when the dual meet starts, every week, grinding, new person. And now there's film off you for the whole first semester. You're not surprising anybody because now you wrestle 10 matches, 15 matches. Now we know their tendency. So I hold off when talking about freshmen that are really outstanding until we see there. But if we talk about underclassing, I really do like Caleb Henson. He surprised me when he came out of Georgia. I thought he was very physical in high school, and I said he's not going to be as physical. Guys are going to have that strength on him. and he's proven me wrong. And he always gives maximum effort, and guys of maximum effort, guys I like to call matches on.
Yeah, I haven't seen him earlier in the season. I was definitely very impressed by Henson, as you just mentioned right there. Rock Harrison with me here on 3 Sports. I'll leave you here with this woman. It's a fascinating question. This is obviously, it's not for this season. It's for next year. Stanford to the ACC. I'm pretty sure, I forget if they made it official or not. Don't quote me on this, but the transition to the ACC now for Stanford from a wrestling perspective, we talk about the Pac-12, how it's vastly different from a wrestling perspective compared to the other major sports. And, of course, if you look at the major sports, Oregon State, Washington State, the only 2 schools remaining. We know Oregon State's a Pac-12 power. If Stanford does make that expected transition in wrestling to the ACC, which is expected at this point for next year, how do you think that works out for their schedule, their program? We know Chris Ayers is doing a nice job already in his first year after leading Princeton for so long. What does that do for you in terms of the wrestling landscape coast to coast, and how Stanford now is going to be, hey, we're going to have to wrestle on the East Coast quite a lot coming up in the next couple of years?
Good question, Nick. I'm not sure what I can share, but I was given an email about, how that's going to work, the travel for the next 2 years and, that. So I'm not sure if that's public knowledge, but it's definitely going to happen. So it's not like, it's going to happen. And the dynamics of them traveling across the country and out there is something that has been presented. It just needs to be approved. What that does is it certainly brings more cachet to the ACC, with not just an academic institution, but as a very good program and good storylines. Storylines are always important, which draws the viewers in. Why should I watch this, and why should I pay attention? So I think that's helpful. Selfishly, I can't wait to get out to Stanford. I'm on the East Coast.
Hey, in your shoes, I would love to go out to Palo Alto as well.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I would make it a vacation. So I look forward to matches if they're going to fly me out there, but I want to get out there for those reasons. But yes, they're definitely going to be a part of it. There's no reason why they're not going to be able to compete early. Rob Cole did a good job of bringing in people, and Chris Ayers has done a good job of taking that talent and building on it. So it's always good to get blue chippers, but like Penn State, they get blue chippers and they make blue chippers better. And so far, Stanford has done that, gotten a very good recruiting class, and they're making statements with them improving.
No doubt. Rock Harrison with me on 3 Sports. Rock, I appreciate your time as always. I'm looking forward to catching up with you as the season progresses. Where can everybody find you on social media?
Sure. Social media, Twitter, Rock, ROCK, Reacts, REAX. Instagram, same thing, Rock, ROCK _ Reacts, REAX. So I appreciate that. Nick, really, you can invite lots of people. So I'm really humbled that you invited me to come on your show.
You caught my eye a couple of years ago, as you did with a lot of people with your booth cam reactions, and someone who was broadcasting wrestling for almost a decade as well. I was like, that's really awesome. And that basically encapsulates some of my reactions as well. But I think you did it a little slightly better with the camera on you. So, Rock, I appreciate your time as always, man.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Rock Harrison with me right here on 3 Sports.